Tony's creating time travel. Here's your look at the new Hot Toys Avengers Endgame Tony Stark team suit. Sophisticatedly crafted based on the portrayal of Robert Downey Jr. as Tony Stark in Avengers Endgame, the movie-accurate collectible figure features a newly developed helmeted head sculpt with LED light-up function that bears a high resemblance to a closed helmet showing part of Tony's face, a newly painted interchangeable head sculpt, a meticulously tailored team suit outfit with Avengers logo on the chest, a battered Iron Man Mark 50 helmet, and a specially designed movie-themed figure stand. Before we start jumping through timelines, the first thing we're going to want to do is figure out how tall Tony Stark team suit stands. I really don't like the name that they chose for this. Team suit? Why wouldn't they have called it Quantum Realm suit? Team suit sounds, if you ask me, just a little bit lame. Anyways, we're going to take the tape measure right to the very top of Team Suit Tony. That sounds even funnier to say that. The figure stands 12 points. Well, we're going to go with 12 inches in height. Switching that over to centimeters, Team Suit Tony, it's hilarious, 30.5 or 30.5 centimeters tall. Now, I'm going to be the bearer of bad news pretty early into this review. This figure comes up short in a lot of departments, one of which happens to be his accessories. He doesn't really come with much of anything. He does come with, right now, a display stand that we're going to look at first, but then when we migrate ourselves over to all the things he comes with, the list is going to be pretty small. Would it be a big bummer there? Starting first, he comes included with the display stand, features the Avengers logo with the A, and then, of course, the font down below. It's generally quite coarse to the touch. It almost has the texturing of a very fine grit sandpaper. You can kind of see the way that light hits off of it. But then here, on the side, just off to the side of the stand, you've got yourself an A. And the A is the smoothest thing that you're going to be feeling on this display stand if you're somebody that likes to feel their display stands. But it's a nice looking stand. At least it brings a little bit of extra color, because when we're looking at the Quantum Realm suits, I'm just going to call it the Quantum Realm suit for the rest of this review, it's pretty basic and simple in colors. Speaking of basic and simple, you can see they're still continuing the trend. They've gone away with using the silver placards. Remember the days gone past, where the 6-scale figures used to have a silver placard on the front that would tell you exactly the name of the character? I'm not really sure what the thought process was on Hot Toys' part and why they just decided to dismiss these altogether in favor of just printing the font on the front. Normally in the past, I would have said, and that would have been a big thing that would have bothered me, because I liked the little silver placard, but although admittingly, you have to go pretty close to the display stand to actually be able to make out who it is, because usually it would just be embossed against that silver placard. By printing the font in, though I would imagine it's being more done as a cost-saving measure, I think it's actually a lot clearer to see the character, of course, what the stand belongs to. And for that reason, I kind of like that. Initially, I would have thought, they're kind of cutting some corners, but I think it actually works a little bit better to their credit. You can see the figures a lot easier when you've got them on a shelf. Now let's run through the accessories that come included with Tony. And like I said, the list sadly is quite small. Starting first, he comes with a very battered-looking helmet of the remaining Mark 50 suit he wore in Avengers Infinity War. I do think it's a nice touch to include this, although it seems a little jarring to include that with something like this particular Tony Stark, because by this point in the movie, I feel like he really didn't need necessarily to have this included with him. But then really, if you ask yourself, well, what other figure would have been released? I don't think we would have gotten malnourished Tony Stark sitting around in space. I don't think we would have gotten ever that figure. So I guess if you are going to include at least the helmet of the Mark 50, you might as well just throw it with the next Tony Stark that gets released, introducing, of course, the Team Suit Tony. I hate that name. It does have some neat detailing done to it. You can see it's quite hollow on the inside. Perhaps as an opportunity to beef up some of the stuff going on with this figure, they could have incorporated a battery light-up option. Of course, it would have resulted in the interior of the helmet being filled in partially, but at least they could have had like a little battery pack or something right there on the back. I suppose if you have options available, you could probably take yourself like a little LED bulb, fit it on the inside of the helmet, and then you'd be able to illuminate out at least from the one eye. Overall, it's a good-looking helmet. just doesn't really make much sense to be coming included with this particular Tony Stark. Up next, we'll have a look at the figure's hands. And though you technically get a pair of each one of these, I'm currently only showing you one of them because the mirror flip of it is currently sitting on the figure. You get a closed fist, or you get two closed fists. Like I said, the other one is right there. And then you get also a pair of relaxed hands. Now, only one side of the figure has hands that actually have the quantum device, as you can see right here. The closed fist version of it, like I said, is on this side of the figure. Now, I know in the movie, I feel like it's actually supposed to be on the other side for Tony. Now, when Clint goes back in time, you can see that the quantum device is on this side of the figure. But I think for Tony, it's supposed to be on the other side. Correct me if I'm wrong. It does have some nice detailing done to it, specifically like the red that they decided to go with for the tops of the glove. The interior of the glove, as you can see, has some nice sculpting going for it, though it doesn't make use of any additional paint. I do think that the device looks good, of course for obvious reasons, and the size of it, you just can't have it light up. But again, I feel like it could be on the wrong place on Tony Stark. In some cases, I've seen it on this side of some of the Avengers, but I think specifically on Tony's, it's supposed to be on the other side. Like I said, correct me if I'm wrong. Tony comes included with two swappable head sculpts. The one currently not sitting on his shoulders is this one right here, him wearing the quantum helmet. You can definitely see some inspiration cues pulled from the original Ant-Man helmet, as for obvious reasons, but it does make use of some nice light grays, darker grays along the bottom area of the helmet, and some metallic reds. Yes, in the movie, this is kind of more of a stark white than this lighter gray. Stark white, I see what I did there. But believe you me, I don't have problems necessarily with the coloring of the helmet when I compare it to the problems I really have with the coloring of his costume. Stay tuned for that. But I do think it's a nice looking helmet. One thing that certainly was a big issue with this particular figure, I've seen some people trying to use alternate head sculpts, specifically Clint's. Popping it into the socket of the current neck doesn't seem to fit. I think what they could have also done too, this is already a pretty good likeness of Tony Stark, what little you see of him. His eyebrows, his eyes of course, and his nose, just the top of it. But I wonder if they could have given you swappable face plates, just this area right here. You could have popped this off and say replaced it with another Avengers member. Oh, likely at least a male Avengers member. And then maybe you could have gotten like a Clint faceplate that could have gone in place there. Again, going back to Tony Stark's likeness, again, what little you see of it is pretty good, but don't worry. If it seems hard to make out because this is all more of a smokier tint, you can illuminate the visor by accessing the top of the helmet. If you spin it around to the side, sort of where you're seeing these points sticking up, something you would expect Flash to have, just above this, you'll see this half-circle ring of gray. Just above that is this little ledge of lighter gray. From there, that's where you're basically going to access it. You're just going to pinch the sides and pull this away from itself. And you'll see then when you're putting it back in place, there's two little tab points on the top and a larger one down below. That'll slide into the slots on the top, and then the larger one will fit down below. What you'll see also inside is the battery compartment, sporting 3 L621 batteries. Don't worry, it does come included with the figure when you pick it up for yourself. And then there's the on and off switch. I generally don't like when the on and off switch involves you having to remove a plate from a figure. Iron Man are notorious for this. I guess it could be a lot worse, but why couldn't they have put some sort of button on the back that you could have pressed? I mean, that place would have been perfect right there, and yet it's not a serviceable button. You have to do this every single time you want to turn it on and off. Speaking of turning it on and off, currently we're looking at it in its off state. Don't worry, I'll fix that shortly. Like I said, it's off and on, and flipping it to on, there's the off, there's the on. And it illuminates a really bright blue on the inside. Clear certainly enough that you can even more than make out Tony Stark's faceplate on the inside. But then again, could they not have included swappable faceplates? You could have actually had just this area right here be a separate piece you could have pulled right out. If the light, say, sits on the inside of the helmet, let's just say right around here, then removable faceplates, eye plates at least, I don't think would have impeded the light source. The light source would have still illuminated down either way. I think they could have done that as a workaround instead of having to release every single Avengers member wearing the team suits, wearing the quantum realm suits that they have in the movie. Just before we put the alternate head sculpt on, I wanted to show you what the default Tony Stark head looks like. In fact, actually, let's do one step further. Let's go ahead and yank this off. What are you doing to your figure? We're going to just pull this off for the time being. I'm going to put on a helmeted head sculpt because eventually we're going to get to that place anyways. And you're going to just twist it onto that ball joint. While you're doing it, of course, you're going to want to be careful to only push the pressure down on the sides. On the top here, you really want to avoid the sides, just for the risks of breaking those points off. But that's what it looks like with the Quantum Realm helmet. I'm just going to put this down here for the time being, because I want to go back and talk a little bit about now the severed head of Tony Stark. I feel like we've been here, we've done this before. You could say that there are slight nuances, differences that are on this particular head that weren't on the ones before it. But I don't feel like this is really anything new, bringing something different to the table for Tony. I will say that the paint is good on the flesh. That's really good. And it seems like he does have visibly more sunken in face, especially around the areas of his cheek. Where I feel like it missed an opportunity is specifically the coloring of his hair. Because of course when we see Tony Stark in Avengers Endgame, he's sporting much more visibly gray hair. And I really don't think that we get that at all with this with this specific face, this head. I mean, the coloring of the brown is okay. Under certain lit conditions, it almost seems to be a little bit more metallic. But I feel like they could have brought in a lot more gray than what we actually get here. He is sporting quite a lot of salt and pepper. That is his hair, after all. But I don't feel like you get a lot of that in this particular head sculpt. The head sculpt is okay, but I don't really feel like we're getting anything new brought to the table, if at the very least they're going to be using this particular head sculpt, which is a very familiar looking Tony face. At the very least, I feel like they could have changed and added some additional gray to his hair, because he's really lacking in that department. So here it comes. Here is my biggest issue when it comes to team suit Tony Stark. It's specifically the suit that he's wearing from the movie. In the movie, this coloring, the gray that they decided to go with, is way too dark. In the movie, it's closer to being white. Not perhaps as white as the helmet, but it's not that much of a shade away from it. I don't know why specifically Hot Toys decided to release a team suit, clearly not even in the same accurate colors that he has in the movie, or any of the characters have in the movie. Again, this choice of gray is way too dark. Another one of the big issues I have with this figure is the placement of his shoulders. If you see in the movie, they've got these little top pieces that are on the top of the suit, which would be illuminated, although we don't get it obviously illuminated here on the 6 scale figure. But what unfortunately happens, though, is the way that the arms were constructed, and then you've got a torso piece over top of the body, it drops the shoulders, I feel, way too far down. This looks like the shoulders have been dislocated. And in the movie, they're actually a little bit more, well, they're seamlessly transitioning from the shoulder area and they go out to the arms. I mean, I feel like the arm area is way too low. I don't know what I would have done differently to fix that, because already you see 2 problems with it. The way it's socketed into the torso, the arms already are dropping lower down than the body. See the top of the body right here? And then when you start adding this extra piece on top of it, it makes it look even more jarring that the arms are dropping lower on the figure. I don't know if perhaps they could have just, I mean, this is an overlaid piece. This section right here goes all the way around, goes all the way along the top, and it goes all the way around to the back here. Could they just not have added this right on to the body as actually, instead of being a separate piece altogether? Because that really does make the arms look terrible. Doesn't it? I mean, it looks like the arms should be a lot higher. They should be right around here. But because, again, the way it's been constructed, it results in the arms being lower down than what they should be. So the color not only is off on the costume, but again, there's something not quite right sitting properly when you're looking at the arms on the figure's costume. Let's do our best to at least talk some of the positives of this costume. Though, of course, the coloring is way off. This is too dark of a gray. It should be a lot lighter than this. I do think that the costume construction is pretty good on the figure. Of course, you got the Avengers logo at the top corner there. And while I don't like this gray, the gray does look good with the black and then the red that they went with, which is almost closer to being like a raspberry metallic red. That looks really good. I just don't get, again, why the coloring of the gray has to be so far off. In the movie, it's, like I said, closer to being a white. And we're clearly not getting it here. It does have some really nice tailoring done to the suit itself. As you could probably guess it just by looking at it. it's going to be a little bit more limited when it comes to the figure's articulation, specifically the legs, because really when the legs, the stretching that you're going to be doing, you can already sort of see where a seam would maybe start opening up on the figure's suit. It's also a little bit more limited too when you're getting to the arms. I guess we probably should talk about that in a second. Of course, you got the overlaid additional silver that's added around the belt area. That looks good as well. And as we get a little bit further down, you've got some really nice overlays of material overlapping one another. I do like the way that they've handled the boots, these being a piece that goes over top of the lower leg. As a result of it, you can rotate these, and I don't really know why you would want to, and at least the boots are a separate piece as well. It would have really driven me bananas if this was all one piece, and you wouldn't be able to at least move the ankles back and forth, but you can, and that's good. It does result, of course, in leaving a big gap when you are moving the ankles back and forth, but at least you can do that. They haven't contained the boots all as one piece. And even to finish off things nicely, they did finish off the bottoms of the feet as well. It looks like there wouldn't be any traction whatsoever. I would imagine in these suits you'd be slipping and sliding. Even in the movie, actually, these suits were all done in CG. They simply just didn't have the time to actually create practical suits that the actors and actresses could wear. So even when you're seeing these quantum suits in the movie, it's all being done in CG. And I never really knew that right away until reading about it later on. The construction of the suit is good. That's at least the positive point that I can make. The coloring, though, I know I sound like a broken record for saying this, is way off on the figure. And again, the way that the things are seamed together on the costume, it really is limiting what you can do with the figure when it comes to its posability. Okay, so let's go ahead and tackle the articulation. Depending on which head sculpt you'll get, you'll either lose a little bit of posability or you'll gain it. What I mean by that, we move this one over and bring in the decapitated Tony Stark head. The head, like other Tony Starks, is attached to his neck. So if you are using this particular head sculpt, it only has just the ball joint on the base of the neck, and that allows the head, of course, to move up and down, back and forth, and all that stuff. If, however, though, you're deciding to display your Tony with the helmet on, then you actually adopt an extra bit of articulation. There's one point which, of course, that has the helmet attached to the neck, and so, of course, that can move up and down, back and forth, and you can rotate it, just, again, being careful of those sides. But then you've actually got a secondary ball joint at the base of the neck. So you can move that back and forth and get a lower reach down when it comes to the head moving up, or moving down, I should say, up, and you can move it a lot more back and forth this way. I think I'm probably going to be displaying this particular Tony with the helmet on, simply just because I have other Tony Starks already on display with a regular Tony Stark. And then, you know what I might just end up doing is using this head sculpt to see if I can swap it out with one of my older Tonys, just because this is a more newer head sculpt. I might just find myself doing that. When it comes to his torso, okay, so he's going to be a little bit more limited, but not as limited as I thought it would be. Because of the nature of the material being a little bit more softer and pliable here at least, you can get still the crunch moving back and forth this way and teetering back and forth this way as well. His arms, sadly though, this is one of my big issues with the figure's costuming. It's really tight around here. To the point where really I would be worrisome about moving the arm any bit past, say, a 45-degree angle. As you're moving it further away, you can probably see where all that stitch line would be here, attaching the sleeve to the rest of the costuming. If you're going to be stressing that, you're going to be stressed too, because that may start ripping open. You will want to be careful of that. The arms move forward and back, but not really a lot, though. Granted, yes, he still has the articulation in the elbow, so at least he can make up for it in that department. But when it comes to moving him from the shoulder, you're really going to be limited with what you can actually pull off. That's always a shame when it comes to these figures. The hands rotate all the way around. Now, looking at just a little bit at these hands here, this is, of course, the closed fist that we were looking at. Well, we were looking at the alternate version, which would be this hand right here. In both cases, though, you can see there's a very obvious curve on the wrist or curve on the glove that's supposed to line up within the curve of the sleeve. It does give you a little more of a seamless look. The downside, though, is when you are rotating the arm, you can already see what ends up happening. The hand rubs up against then the forearm, and you always are getting that kind of thing butting up against the other thing next to it. You can still twist the wrist around, don't get me wrong, but while you are doing it the first time, you're going to be hitting that sleeve. And I don't know if that's going to cause damage to the material right around here, so you will want to be a little bit more careful about that as well. I know it always sounds like we're saying, be careful, be careful. It's really a shame when you really think of how expensive these figures are, and then you have to kind of handle them almost with gloves on. As for the legs, they do split out, but be careful, though, of that seam line. That's so awkward for us to be looking at the inside of his crotch there. But you can already see right there. Maybe it's not. Maybe it's not. Maybe we're still good. But it definitely, there is a contender right there for an opening. And that's the last place you really don't want the costume to start opening and freeing, is right around that stitched section there. The legs move forward and back, but that's really to the extent of what you can actually pull off. That's about 45 forward, 45 back. And, well, a mild splits on the legs. He does have the swivel at the top of the thigh. You can double hinge on the knee. And again, the only thing I really like about what they've done with the lower half of the figure is at least they broke this up. This is a separate piece than this. When it comes to moving his ankles, there's no limitations whatsoever. You can move the ankles freely as much as you really want. It just will result in some cases, depending on how much wiggle you have to that ankle, you're going to see a little bit of that gap. It's just really one of those unavoidable cases. Sort of a mixed bag on this figure. I really wanted to like the figure because even though I'm not a big fan of the Quantum Realm suits in the movie, I think it would have been something that could have translated well to a 6-scale figure from Hot Toys. I think at the time they had planned a Captain America as well, but Steve Rogers I don't think is going to be happening now. We're only going to be getting, as far as I know, just the Tony Stark in his team suit. Can we really not have called it the Quantum Realm suit? Figure as a whole comes up really short. He has some difficulties, and first of all, he doesn't come with much in the way of accessories. The accessories that he does come included with, I don't want to say phoned in, but I feel like the Tony Stark alternate portrait, for example, doesn't have the gray in his hair, which is really the one thing, obviously seeing him in the movie, he has visible grays. Why they didn't include that with the figure in the first place? The coloring of the costume is way off. It should have been a lot lighter of a color instead of this lighter gray. It should have been actually closer to being white. Maybe not the same coloring as the helmet, but it should at least been closer to that than the lighter gray that we ended up getting. And of course, you can very easily see it here, just as we're wrapping up this review. His shoulders are dropped way too low. A lot of it is the culprit more so of that torso piece right here, sort of then lifting the torso and making the shoulders look even lower than what they really should be. Though it probably makes absolutely no sense to display your Tony Stark, him holding the Mark 50 helmet in hand, because it's two different places in the movie. They really shouldn't exist like this. But at least if they're going to include the accessory, dang nabbit, I'm going to use it here, at least in final looks, that he can be displayed along with it. This Mark 50 helmet, I'll probably just, I'll display with another Tony, because it's there. I appreciate at least they included it. And until we get a malnourished Tony Stark, could you imagine if they released it and they called the packaging Malnourished Tony? Who would actually buy that? Maybe I probably would buy it. It's an accessory I really think that doesn't belong with this figure, but then really if you remove it, it doesn't leave much of anything else that comes included with the figure either. I started to think to myself, what other things could they have thrown in with the team suits? Well, maybe they could have gone the routes of the Alex Murphy, the RoboCop. If you remember, that figure had the ability to have the helmet. Well, it involved you having to take the top wig of his head off, and then you could put kind of the frame of the helmet around his head. Maybe they could have done that as a mid-transformation, because of course it's all CG, but in the movie the idea is that the helmets are supposed to close around the heads. Maybe they could have given us some appliance piece that could have fit around Tony Stark's head in the sense that it didn't look like it was fully closed, but it looked like it was starting to close up. I really feel like this is a figure that Hot Toys wanted to release but didn't want to invest a lot into it. I don't mean that in a negative way, because you did get a good looking figure here for the most part, but I feel like there's definitely a lot that was left on the table with this guy's release. And of course, the possibility of getting other team suits, Avengers, is probably slim to none. I think at one point, yes, we were supposed to be getting a Captain America. I don't think that's going to be happening anytime soon. And really, let's face facts. Would everybody be wanting to get on board picking up every one of the Avengers in their team suits? I probably wouldn't. If anything, I would probably pick up a Steve Rogers and a Tony Stark, and that's about it. Another idea that, of course, I threw out in this review was why not face plates, or at least the eye plates? Why couldn't that have been something that would have been interchangeable? You could have popped one piece out, replaced it with a Steve Rogers, or you could have replaced it with a Clint. So at least you could have bought more than one of these figures, and you didn't then have to worry about swapping out the heads. You could have just swapped out the visor plates. But again, feel like Sort of feel like there's a lot of ideas that were left off the table, and as a result of it, we sort of get an unfinished looking and feeling team suit Tony Stark. The costume coloring is off, the paint on his hair is off, and then again, just the accessories are almost slim to none. Throwing in an accessory that isn't even specific to when they're wearing these suits. I almost feel like I would say pass on this figure, unless you really like the design of the team suits. But again, why couldn't we have called these the Quantum Suit Tony Stark? Team suit sounds ridiculous. What do you guys think of this figure? Let me know down below in the comments section. And what other accessories would you have included with Team Suit Tony Stark? Let me know again down below in the comments section. If you guys are new to this channel, enjoying all the content you're seeing, be sure to hit the subscribe button down below and turn the bell notification on. And come back to this channel regularly because we are going to be looking at some more Hot Toys reviews. Those are going to be all lined up and coming your way. But we're also going to be looking at some other reviews, as there's always new content popping up Monday to Friday, 2 times a day. Could you believe that? 2 times a day. There's always new videos, like I said, popping up. Lots of stuff coming your way, guys. So as always, thanks for watching. See you guys next time.